Book Dragons. It is your girl Lindsay with the Spine Book Cast, and we have another episode for you today. I'm super excited. I have one of my favorite people in the entire world, Zoe Bacurin, and she is the author of Mobs and Desserts.
Yes.
And Bring Back My Bonnie.
Yes.
Which is
correct.
adorable, by the way. They're both written in this very sing-songy kind of way.
Yeah, I addressed it in kind of a poetic style.
Right.
Like, just because you're writing something narrative doesn't mean it can't sing like a song, so to speak.
Right. And it reminds me very much of the TV show Pushing Up Daisies and the very quick back and
That's
rapid.
my favorite show.
Love. When I read Bring Back My Bonnie and I figured out that that's what you were doing, it made me love your book so much more.
I originally kind of taught myself how to write dialogue off of Pushing Daisies and the way that Brian Fuller, the showrunner, writes dialogue. I kind of
didn't know
studied
that.
the shows. Mm-hmm.
Far
So
out.
like Dead Like Me, Wonderfall, shows like that.
Okay.
Kind of observed the way he had characters interact off each other. Because dialogue was my weakest point when I started writing. I wasn't really sure how to do it. So I really used those TV shows.
Okay.
I think that's a good medium when you want to look at something like dialogue, something that's scripted where they don't have all the details that you would in a novel.
Right.
And they have to solely rely on dialogue for their writing. That's always a good source to go to for inspiration.
I've never thought about doing it that way before.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good idea. Okay, well, so let's talk about reading. How did you get into reading?
I have always been surrounded by books. I come from a huge family of readers.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I can remember, my grandfather has had like these huge 3 mahogany bookshelves. Just
Sure.
packed full of books, overflowing.
Sure.
And I was given kind of a free reign of his books from a young age.
Okay.
And which really led to me reading a bunch of doorstopper sci-fi and fantasy with a lot of violence and sex at far too young an age.
That happens. That happens. So what was your favorite book as a kid?
As a kid, I don't know. I feel like the answer to that question, like what my favorite book is, has changed constantly.
Okay.
Well, it kind of solidified when I was 16, but as a kid, I don't know if I pegged it down. I kind of just read anything and everything.
Okay.
But when I was 16, I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which we've discussed before.
We have discussed.
My very favorite book.
Despise that book.
I adore it so much. I feel seen by that book.
Why?
Just the way it depicts isolation and kind of mental illness, maybe at a time when certain things weren't even named yet. I love the way it's written. It is Shirley Jackson is another author who deeply inspires me with the way she writes, where just because you're writing a narrative story doesn't mean you can't be poetic with your language. And like that always means a lot to me, not just if you're telling a good story, but how you're telling it. Okay,
that's fair. I mean, at least you have a reason for liking the book as opposed to I just like the book, which
I love the character. She's a moody, hateful little thing who does not like people, and I love her. She's like, I like my sister and my cat, and God help the rest of the world. I don't want to deal with it.
I feel that sometimes. Yeah, okay.
You might want to give We Have Always Lived in the Castle another shot.
You know, that is entirely possible because I've said before that you can read a book when you're like 12 and get one thing from it. And then you can read that exact same book when you're 15, 16, 17 and get something completely different from it. And then again, read it 30, 40, totally something, you know, so just depending on what you're going through at the time that you're reading that book. Yeah, so, well,
I think that's why that book means so much to me too, because I read it at 16 and instantly connected with it. And I just recently reread it for probably the 5th or 6th time this past summer. Or I guess we're still in the summer a little bit. But, But it still means so much to me, but in a different way now as a 32-year-old than a 16-year-old. sings to me in a whole new way, but it's
Yeah.
still my favorite book.
That's the same thing with me for To Kill a Mockingbird, because the first time I read it, I think I was 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being absolutely violently enraged at the ending and the injustice of it as a kid, but also feeling helpless because, what the hell are you going to be able to do? Just like Jim and Scout, it wasn't fair. And then you find out, well, life isn't really fair. And then I watched the movie, and you watch I can never remember his name.
Gregory Peck.
Thank you. You watch Gregory Peck just railing against that douchey redneck father, and I just remember being absolutely blown away by there's Atticus Finch, there he is,
Yeah.
and then I have reread it, God, 20 billion times, and each time it's a different level of anger, but it's also an understanding now at the time, and that's how things were, but it doesn't make it right, but it's a more dull understanding that I didn't have at 16. So I love that books can do that, that there's certain books. And I mean, okay, so talking about books, every time that they have, and it's such a weird statistic, I could know something useful, but killers that have 3 names, there's a lot of statistics to show that they read Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, yeah.
And have several copies. And I've read that book, and I don't get it.
I find Catcher in the Rye unbearable.
I love that book so much.
What's his name? Holden Caulfield?
Holden Caulfield. Yes, yes. No, there is a level of that. Well, that there is a level of that because he is 16. And he is like in the cat I Capture the Castle, that hormonal pissy teenager thing.
I guess it's much more the masculine version of
Sure.
that. It doesn't translate in a way that speaks to me where I'm just
absolutely
like, oh.
Well, and I think when I read it the first time at 16, I was like, oh my God, right? And now I just kind of want to smack him in the back of the head, like, okay, yes, you have every right to be justified, but dude, get over it.
Yeah, I think that's something too I like about We've Always Lived in the Castle is I like angry girls in fiction because you don't often get that. It's all from the angry boy's perspective.
I love
and what
you bring
the girl
that up.
can be to him.
Who was I talking to the other day? We were talking about the female narrative in books. And I feel like we've always had angry females, but the books haven't been as prevalent. And now you've got this whole genre of fantasy fiction now where you have
women's rage.
Yes, just the fuck are you doing? Sit down. I will handle this. You're getting on my nerves. I don't have time for this crap. Women's rage, which I just adore. But then you also have, and I don't know, but for me, you also have the morally compromised gray villain / hero who wants to burn the world down because somebody looked at her funny, but also knows, I'm just going to sit here and let her just handle this. Good luck with that, dude. And just he trusts his partner to, no, she's got this. You're in deep shit. I'm just going to sit back and watch my woman handle it. And I love that empowerment of it.
Yeah.
There's there's a lot less of this. Oh no, what am I going to do? I need a man to save me. And it's now much more of this, I got this, sit down. And I love that about books now. And there's such a great, I think the young adults, new adult genre is so much better because you and I are similar in age. So you and I kind of grew up with all of that Disney, and I love Disney princess stuff.
Like we were both in school at the same time, just several grades apart. Essentially. So.
And I feel
I was always jumping into stuff that wasn't meant for my age group anyway.
Flowers in the Attic at age 10, like.
And we've talked about my mom was a teen mom and a child of the 80s. So she raised me on like John Hughes films and Cyndi Lauper.
Which is all wonderful things. Like John Hughes he will always be one of my all-time favorite filmmakers because I think that, 16 Candles, Breakfast is tip or not
The
Breakfast.
Breakfast Club.
Thank you. The Breakfast Club. All of those movies, he was able to depict the angst of teenagers and the just, oh my God, I cannot deal with this stupid crap. And I think what's really sad is some of those Breakfast Club movies, I say, like all of the genre of those, Pretty in Pink, all of that, Better Off Dead. You can't make some of those movies now.
Yeah.
Because people
there's stuff that doesn't age well in them
people
for sure.
get so offended.
There's some rapey stuff in there that I'm not a fan of.
No. But also there's some stuff that as a teenager you can sit there and look at and go, right.
I know we've talked about Heathers is a big one for me. That's not John Hughes, but of the
No,
era.
I love Heather so much.
Really.
And then in the 90s they did Jawbreaker, which was
I never saw that one.
It's like a
Studio Ghibli.
90s version of Heathers.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Winona Ryder and Kristen Slater are irreplaceable.
Yeah.
To me, you cannot, no.
That said, I do love the Heathers musical.
Oh God, that movie, every time I watch that movie, it just gets funnier and funnier. And people, I remember when it came out, do you remember how upset people got when that movie came out? And it was just like, dude,
I haven't been born.
Oh yeah. That's right. So yeah, okay.
I watched everything too late.
Yeah. So when that movie came out, people got really, really upset. And it was like, you realize this is a dark comedy, right? This is supposed to be darkly funny. This like, get a grip. Same thing like when Christian Slater was in Pump Up the Volume, which is one of my favorite movies that I've ever watched in my entire life because Christian Slater's character is this introvert that is so shy and quiet to the point that he almost has no social engagement at all. But he has this massive alter ego thing going on with this night radio program that he does under the radar in his basement. That he hijacks a radio signal from all this,
This sounds very 80s.
Oh, it is fantastic. And he does this radio program where he talks about real things and the scary stuff that teenagers were going through and reads letters and plays music. And, like one kid ends up committing suicide, which he does not mean to happen. And it really wasn't his fault, but he was trying to reach out to this kid to help him and nobody else was doing it. And of course he gets the blame for this illegal radio program, which it is by far, and it's one of my favorite soundtracks ever because it's late 80s, early 90s. So it's almost into that changeover from the 80s music.
From synth to grunge.
Yeah. Almost in there. Oh my God. And I love books and movies that take that angst of growing up and are actually very realistic about how much it sucks. And tries to hit it with a little bit of sense of humor. Yeah. And I think that the genres that we're reading now are so much better than when we were little and we had, Sweet Valley High, Babysitter's Club, and our version of sci-fi was Lord of the Rings. Sure. And then there's some of that really obscure stuff that I haven't read yet. But I really like the way books are going right now.
The obscure stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what are you reading now?
I usually, because I grew up on comics too,
Sure.
so I'll go back and forth. I'll read a novel and then I'll read a couple of trade paperback comics that collect like 5 issues from a series.
Sure.
So I've been reading off and on. I am very far behind. I'm not up to date on a lot of the current comics because it's usually what I can find at a bookstore.
Sure.
So I've been working my way through a Wonder Woman series for like 3 years now. So I just finished another installment of that. And now I've got, I'm about to start reading a series called Something is Killing the Children, which is another.
You and I talked about that. Remind me what that is again.
Oh, I don't think we did talk about it because I haven't read it yet. So.
Because I talked about that series with somebody then because I've heard that series. and I was really interested in
It
reading
won an
it.
Eisner Award, which is
Yeah.
like the big thing.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah.
And I've read some of James Tinian, who wrote it. I've read some of his other stuff, which is very bizarre and very strange, like Mimetic and what was the other one? Oof, I can't remember off the top of my head. But he writes very bizarre, cerebral stuff.
I love that kind of stuff. So like I got Frankenstein and Dracula and then The Tempest and Othello's graphic novels because I wanted to go
Mhm.
back and reread those, but I don't have the time to dedicate reading, the tombs that I have
Yeah.
upstairs. So I wanted, and I really like graphic novels too because I think the art in them is just absolutely
Oh,
incredible.
I love it. I read one recently called Monstrous, which
Uh-huh.
I've been wanting to read for a long time. Finally read the first volume. Just utterly gorgeous. And
Yeah.
it's about like just humans and monsters fighting each other, but it's very inspired by like Asian mythology. And
Sure.
it's like every drawing looks like a watercolor almost, and it might have
I
even been
love
done with time.
that.
It is
That reminds me of
gorgeous.
Lore Olympus. So Lore
Oh, I know
Olympus,
Laura.
yeah. Persephone and
Mhm.
and Hades and all that kind of stuff. And the first time I ever saw anything was on that app. That's like
Webtoons.
yes,
Yeah, I
Webtoons.
read webtoons.
Yeah, and I now have all the books. And I just remember thinking, I don't even care what this story's about. The art in it was
Mhm.
just
Oh yeah,
mind blowing.
speaking of that, I'm a huge Nevermore fan right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, inspired by obviously the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, and
Yep.
it's a love story between the lost Lenore and Annabelle Lee.
Yes, I haven't read that, but I know of it, and it's on my list.
And it's my phone's lock screen is them caught in a very
I love it.
a very aggressive sapphic
I
pose.
love that though. I love that. I love that. So how do I say this? I feel like comics and graphic novels have always been considered by some
Like
people
not enough real art.
Yeah, like not enough real art, or it doesn't count as reading.
Oh, I just love storytelling, and I don't care what medium
Yeah.
it comes in. If it's a book, a comic, a movie, a
Mm.
television show, a
Well,
video
it's the
game,
same thing
a
with
podcast
me.
drama.
With like the Kindle. I knee jerk reacted, sorry, to the whole online reading. It's not reading, you need a book. But now I have a Libro.fm. I have a Kindle.
Mhm.
I have my books. I will listen to literature in any form. I will put any way that I can get it into my head as fast as possible.
I'm still in just reading physical books territory, but that's more as a method of like limiting screen time.
Sure.
Because I just living in 2024, I use the screen so much that
Oh
I like
yeah.
to.
Well,
Yeah.
when I went to Arizona last year for my other job,
Mhm.
I took my Kindle and it got me through three really just horrible flights because we had to take two to get to Arizona, which were it was like some little kid had taken a plane and just waved it around like a crazy person. And I was like, I'm either going to vomit or pass out, but I will read my book and try to just not freak out on the plane. And then on the way back, it was such a horrific experience trying to get through the airport and all that. That by the I was so anxious sitting on the plane to come home, and I just want to come home. That I read the book. I read a book on my Kindle, and I can't imagine trying to read a book in my physical hands when the plane is all, So having a Kindle, I could,
Yeah.
So I like that there are ways. I just think it's so cool that there's ways for every single person to read or listen to a book now,
Mhm.
so that because some people just can't sit
Yeah.
and read, but they can listen to audiobooks all day long.
Yeah.
And that still counts.
Mhm. Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah.
Like my mom has ADHD, not to throw my
No,
mom's
no.
dirty laundry out, but she's like, it took her a while to get through my latest book just because it's difficult for her to
Yeah,
sit down
sure.
and read a lot. So
Have you ever thought about doing your books as podcasts? Or not podcasts, but
as audio?
Yeah.
Yes, it would just be like the method of how I'd do that.
Mhm.
And like, do I want to read them myself? I don't know if I do.
Yeah.
And then the mic for it and stuff, it's just the way I self-publish now, I have the tools there to make the paperback, the hardback,
Mhm.
the ebook version. and I don't really have that easy access for audio.
Have you, okay, so let's, if you could pick anybody to narrate your book for an audiobook.
Winona Ryder.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, I should have known that. I don't know why I asked, because, yeah, I love her.
Yeah, I do.
Like, did you see the interview that she did with the guy from Stranger Things who plays
David Harbour?
Yes, I love David Harbour, first of all. But they're sitting there and they're talking about something, and she says, well, I don't even know why they chose me for, they were talking about some role, and she's like, I don't even know why they chose me for this role, because I'm not that cute or whatever. And the immediate head whip of David Harbour looking at her in this, what are you talking about? And the look of horror is he realizes she doesn't think that she's attractive, and him just going, what?
She's the patron saint of weird goth girls
Yes.
everywhere.
And the look on David Harbour's face as he looks at her, and he even said to her, what are you talking about? You're a goddess. And I feel like that is every single person that thinks and loves Winona Ryder, hearing her say that. What?
Yeah.
But I just remember I saw that and I laughed so hard.
Yeah, I adore her. She
Oh.
obviously, like
Yes.
Beetlejuice, Heathers, like
All of
all her
it.
films has really helped me
Reality
kind
Bites
of
was one of my favorites.
I haven't seen her yet.
Oh my God. Oh, it's like the John Hughes generation grew up, and
Yeah,
this is what happened to them, and they're still insufferable and have no idea how to function in life.
Yeah.
Even as adults, it's still screwed.
That's humanity. Everyone's insufferable and doesn't know how to function.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
That's the history of the world.
And we don't ever learn.
No, we don't.
No, I think individually we learn, but as a general group of people, I spend half the time kind of going,
we slide back a lot.
Oh God, all the time.
Because you'd like to think that progress happens and it's static, but it isn't.
No. Just gonna, yeah.
Like if you look at something like, obviously trans rights are a big issue right now. But if you look back to the indigenous peoples of America, they had people they referred to as two spirits, who were basically trans and non-binary individuals that they revered deeply. And colonialism kind of came in and washed away those notions of gender for the more binary man and woman standards. So really, Western colonialism really came through and just paved over a lot of more progressive ideas that existed hundreds of years ago.
I have tried really hard the last maybe 10 years, 13 maybe, to re-educate myself about history that they didn't teach us in high school and college and that kind of stuff, like Tulsa, Oklahoma. I didn't know about that till I was in my 30s. Like Black Wall Street, all of that, I didn't know about any of that. I didn't know
We've talked about the Stonewall riots.
Yeah, didn't know about the Stonewall riots until I got out of college.
Well, of course they wouldn't teach.
And it was just like,
I mean,
wait, what?
I mean, when I was in school, they were still teaching the Civil War. Like they really leaned heavy on the states' rights thing. So, like, we don't really have to talk about slavery because that's uncomfortable.
Oh my God! I think about all the stuff that I wish I knew in high school and college that I'm just now, even at 47, still finding out that has happened to non-white people is the only way I know how to phrase that.
Yeah.
And I know that's not the right way, but indigenous people, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, gay people, trans people, like all the different barbaric things that our government has done to those people in the name of like freedom or protection or anti what is the anti
it's easy to espouse these beliefs about freedom and but to actually follow up on it and express that empathy.
And I never knew about any of that, and I feel sometimes when I find out something and other people know about it, I'm just like, wait, what?
Mhm.
And I ask questions and I end up going and doing research because it's just, why were we not taught about that?
Yeah. Just one of those things, people like rewrite history. Like, it's a long running joke among lesbians. Like, historians will always refer to lesbians as very good friends.
Which is so
Like
stupid.
how Emily Dickinson's very obviously sapphic nature was
Yes.
kind of buried for so many years. It's like, well, when we discuss her poetry, we need to discuss it in this very heterosexual way, which is obviously.
And I think that's such a loss of understanding for certain writers. If you pinhole them down to this one stereotype,
Mhm.
you miss how lovely some of the things that are written are.
Mhm.
Because it just I find myself reading things differently as an adult with knowledge that's different because I hated Emily Dickinson when I was younger, but now that I know that a lot of her stuff is sapphic in
Mhm.
nature and I have a better understanding of it, I have more of a, huh,
Yeah.
that's really okay. That makes more sense now.
Mhm.
And I wish that we had that freedom of education to go, yeah, but is that really the truth of what they're saying? Because this is what I read,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons that I started the LGBTQ book club is because I wanted to read a book about Stonewall. I wanted to read books that maybe might make me a little uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Like,
Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I also wanted, it was when all of this stuff about being an ally started coming out.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, I keep saying that I want to do that, but if I'm not willing to do the work, then how can I sit there and say that?
I read someone wrote something recently that I really liked. They said queer people don't need an ally, we need an accomplice, which
Yes.
I love that.
Well, so when Murfreesboro decided that they wanted to ban, and I always forget what the fourth book was, but it was Genderqueer Flamer. This book is gay,
Mhm.
and I cannot remember what the fourth one is, and it drives me crazy that I can't remember. But I had decided, oh, we're banning books now. Cool. And I ordered several copies of all four of the
Mhm.
books, and the LGBTQ book club was like, this is what we're reading now.
Yes.
Cool. And I remember when I read Flamer, I felt so sad for this little kid because it's about a little kid at Bible camp during the summer who's obviously gay and he's fighting his nature and you know.
Oh, I've been to Catholic summer
Right.
camp.
I felt so sad for him because he didn't, the one person that he did actually have someone to help him through some of that stuff gets fired because they find out he's gay.
Mhm.
You know, and then in This Book is Gay, it literally was a, this is how to be straight, this is how to be gay, this is how to be bisexual, this is what this means, this is what this means, this is what this means, you know. It
Mhm.
was literally a how to be a human being, and this is what your sexual urges mean, and this is how to handle them, and this is what to understand about your body.
Mhm.
Which I don't understand why that was being banned, because literally I wish I had read that in high school.
Because of course it was.
It would, it
It's
just,
people
to
in
me,
power
there were
are
terms in that book.
puritanical.
Yes. But there were terms in that book that I spent half time going, what? I didn't know that. I did not know that. And it, you know, and then I read Genderqueer because up till then I had struggled with understanding what non-binary meant.
Mhm.
And it wasn't that I didn't accept it. Okay, so yeah, but I don't understand what that means
Mhm.
from a straight
And you do
perspective.
something, which is what most queer people desire, which is you educate yourself to
Yes.
find out and accept, as opposed to, I
Right.
don't understand this,
Well, so
eliminate it from society.
no, and so exactly. So I read Genderqueer, which is about a woman who doesn't feel like a woman, but doesn't feel like a boy either. And
They're
her
a person.
period, yes,
Mhm.
and her periods are excruciating. She hates her boobs, and she struggles with the binding, and she struggles with going through her gynecology visits.
Mhm.
You know, and just all the things that you have to do, but she doesn't feel like and reading that book, my whole point in reading that specific book for me allowed me to go, oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's okay. that makes more sense to me. That, and I had a friend who I could ask questions about, like,
Yes.
so she said this in the book, and I don't really understand what that means. And having that conversation with someone, who knew I'm trying to educate myself by reading this book. Can you elaborate on this for me?
Yeah.
And I wish people would understand that books are not for banning. Books are for educating. And if you don't understand a subject, instead of banning it, read something on it, ask questions, try to be open to the fact that you don't have to agree with it. You don't gotta like it, but you do have to try to understand it.
Books are a place for us to be our weirdest, most blatant, extreme
Yes.
selves.
And it's also a place for us to figure out who we are
Mm-hmm.
and how we feel about things.
Oh yeah.
Because where I grew up, racism was normal.
Of course.
And I went to college and had my ass handed to me a couple times by some of my friends who I'm still friends with who are not white and very much, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And just understood that, okay, explain it to me. And having, that safe space to go, okay, yeah, that was my bad. I need to unlearn that.
Yeah.
And in a lot of the books that I've read,
I try to address, like, in everything I do, I just try to be better than I was yesterday.
Yes. And I love that books do that. It's one of my favorite things about reading is that I think reading is supposed to make you think. If you're not comfortable, I feel like the book is doing its job.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
I think that if you are sitting there and you kind of have like, I don't like the way this makes me feel when I'm reading this. Okay, why?
Definitely. I try to write really viscerally sometimes, like purposely, like I'll have an idea for something and I'll be like, this is uncomfortable and this is strange and this is
your book, Bring Back My Bonnie, when you're talking about the scene, like the scene where the girl gets found out and she's so like just heartbroken and what happens to her in the, oh my God, I was so mad at you. I was so mad because I was like, why would you do that?
People call authors sadists. It's like, why would you do this to that character? That chapter, because I write 4 drafts. Yeah. So I wrote a version of that scene 4 times and it was excruciating.
Oh, I'm sure.
Every time, but I needed to write it. Like,
that was excruciating to read because it made me so angry at her parents. And it made me so angry at the other girl's parents. And it made me so angry at her. I was just like, like I had to get up and go walk away because I was so upset for her. And then I remember reading the rest of the book. I was like, if she does not get her happy ending, I'm going to be so mad at you. I may never speak to you again.
And yeah, I don't get any enjoyment out of like my characters struggling.
Sure.
What I like to write is characters overcoming struggles and adversity. But to do that, they have to experience the struggle and adversity. So you have to write that stuff and make it painful and intense and visceral. And so the reader can feel it all in their heart too, because only then can you.
But I love that you do that though. Because if I've read a book and I feel like I'm kind of, okay, that was pretty good. I feel like it was a waste of time reading the book if it doesn't make me feel anything.
If it doesn't evoke anything.
Yeah. Like it's so Dan and Lloyd, they give me so much grief. Yes, I'm talking about you. But if they, when I read their books and I text them like, and even Elizabeth Cook, oh my God, what are you doing? And like my angry text at 11:30 at night because I'm reading their book. And they are like, no, I love it because it means that you're into what I'm reading. But it's also like, I love you, but I'm never going to speak to you again. Why would you do that to me? And when I read Elizabeth's book, I literally, when I finished the last chapter and I finished the book, I texted her like 10:30 night, bitch, you better fix it. And she knew exactly what I was talking about. I was like, how could you do that? What is wrong with you? And so I know. And so when she wrote the chapter where she fixed it, she emailed it because she was here. I fixed it. I'm really sorry. But I love that everybody makes fun of me because I'm loud. And I think Dan and Lloyd had a text conversation one time where one of them told the other, even her texts are loud because
Mhm.
I was in all caps, and I realized about myself, but I also
You
think
feel things. There's
I
nothing wrong
do
with that.
very deeply.
I think that's
And
what every writer wants, is someone who will feel every word they put on the page.
yes,
So you're the
and
ideal reader in a lot of ways.
I remember being so miserable in high school
Mhm.
and reading, and I think reading does this for a lot of people, but reading gave me a so much needed escape from my life when I was unhappy.
Mhm. Same. I felt so out of my body and uncomfortable in my skin and in my life.
Being a
And
teenager
yeah.
is legitimately the worst.
Mhm.
Because especially if you're like a 15-year-old girl and all of a sudden you have hips and thighs and a butt and boobs and you don't know what to do with all this stuff that's growing on your body. And I can't imagine what it is for a dude with all that hanging down there, and it has a mind of its own, and you're just uncomfortable, and you just
No,
nothing
it's an
fits.
awful period of life,
It, and so, but
which
you read a book.
inspires and makes us
Yes.
so much.
Yes, the trauma of growing up.
Trauma of adolescence
Oh God. But then you
shapes
read
the
about a
fractured adults that we
character
are.
who is fighting dragons and demons, and they win, and
Mhm.
they're better for it. It makes you just kind of, okay,
Yeah.
if I can get through this.
When I was in Catholic school, which is like right before high school, I bought a copy of Stephen King's Carrie at a scholastic book fair.
One of the best book
And,
ever.
and I took it to class with me, and one of the nuns basically went off on me, like, how dare you bring that in my classroom, and basically went on this rage against Stephen King and what he represents. So out of spite, I read nothing but Stephen King for a
That
year.
a girl.
So that's one of those experiences that really shaped me, is just I'm devoting a whole year to horror to spite the nuns who are teaching me.
I got in trouble at school because I was in ninth grade and I was reading The Stand,
Mhm.
which The Stand is what, like
Oh,
5 inches
I read
thick
the
or something?
the
Unabridged.
yes,
Yeah, no,
that's
me
the one I
too.
read too.
Me too. It weighs
During
like
my horror year.
like 10 pounds,
Mhm.
And I was sitting in biology class reading it, and some guy made fun of me, and I got made fun of so much in high school that I was
Mhm.
damn near suicidal by my senior year. And
Oh,
God
yeah,
bless
really.
my English teacher, Mrs. Rose. If it had not been for her, I don't know where I would be. But Mrs.
Yeah.
Rose was my English teacher, and she was instrumental in getting me out of high school, and understanding you just got to get out of here. But I was sitting in my biology class, which I hated, and some guy called me a stupid ass nerd or a fucking nerd or something like
Mhm.
that. And I looked over at him and I went, "Fuck you,
Mhm.
leave me alone," and went back to my book and my
Yeah.
and my biology teacher, instead of telling him to leave me alone, said, "Well, that's not nice language for a lady." And I said, "I'm trying to read.
Yeah.
You gave us free period. I'm trying to read, and he's harassing me while I'm reading."
Mhm.
And he said, "Well, that's not language." It's like, "How about you tell him to leave me alone?" And so the guy kept giving me crap. So I finally had enough and took my book and hit him in the face with it. Just what? And I got in
All
trouble.
1,000 plus pages of The
All
Stand.
just wham. And I said, "You're going to shut up now." And I got escorted to the office, and my parents got called. And I remember my mom was like, "We don't hit people." And I was like, "Yeah, well, we don't harass people, but apparently that's allowed." So I
Mhm.
got sent home for the day with a strong, stern discussion. And I was just like, I hate this school,
Yeah.
because that one lesson taught me that no one's going to stick up for me except for my parents. The school is not going to protect me. I
Oh, yeah.
defended myself, and I got in trouble for it.
I got that same experience at Catholic school, very much so, where it was kind of decided I was going to be the problem
The
child
problem
by
child. Yeah.
I had such bad blood with Mother Superior.
I feel like readers get that a lot. We don't
Mhm.
want to be bothered. Leave us alone. We just want to read.
Yeah, I got bullied tremendously in elementary school, like to the point that I had to switch schools and went to Catholic school, where the nuns didn't treat me much better.
Yeah.
But I kind of taught myself by the time I was a teenager how to mask, and like basically just I can be whatever you need me to be, and that was why high school was really
That
exhausting
is
for
a
me,
trauma response too.
because I basically fit in with all these, like I'd hang out with like the popular kids and stuff, but I'm like I'd be like feel dead inside
Oh,
with like a
God.
fake smile on my face.
The popular
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
And yeah, so high school wasn't as, from an outward appearance, wouldn't have seemed as traumatic. But I felt like Emily Dickinson going to the circus every day with like a mask on, the drama mask with the big grin on it,
It's
which
so,
has ended up being a mildly helpful skill in my adult life.
yes.
Because I can kind of fake my way through anything at this point.
You know, and at this point, I don't fake my way through it.
Mhm.
I may not verbally say something,
Yeah.
but if I don't like something, I mean, you've seen my face.
Mhm.
My face.
You catch glimpses of my real self coming out every now and then, where you'll be
Yes.
like, Zoe, you okay? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Because, but
I'm a real girl, not a haunted house.
I also know that my face,
Mhm.
there's a face.
Betrays what's happening.
Yes,
sometimes.
and I will have a face, and Jessica will look at me sometimes, and she'll like, I'm like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Making a face. I know I'm making a face.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that when you need to shut your brain off, I read or I watch really awful TV like Shameless, which I love that show right now.
Oh, Shameless is an awful.
It's
good
a
show.
dumpster fire,
Yeah, but it's well written.
but it's so well written.
Mhm.
But then I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, I think, and Jessica and I both have talked about this. We think that there's some kind of measure for TV shows that if we like it, it's going to get canceled.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Though I feel like now is a much better time for television. Like a lot of the stuff that got canceled when I was a teenager, like Pushing Daisies and stuff, that stuff would thrive now on a streaming service.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, and so I'm going to bring this up too. So, have you heard, do you like Neil Gaiman?
Well, we've talked about recently.
Yes, that's what I want to bring up.
I was tremendously, well, I don't know if I enjoyed quite a lot of his work.
Me too.
But
Jessica and I both absolutely love all of his stuff. We've read it all. And then I was on the internet yesterday and I saw that.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm gonna tell you what I'm talking about. So it was on bookriot.com because I want to sort or cite my source. So bookriot.com did an article about why the Dead Boy Detective Agency and the
Graveyard Book adaptation.
Thank you. I was trying to think cemetery. The Graveyard Book adaptation, which was going to be an animated adaptation, both got canceled. And it's because there are now 5 women accusing Neil Gaiman of sexual assault. And I sent it to my friend Jess, and I was like, did you know about this? This can't be true. Like, it can't be true. Like, not Neil Gaiman, because you know, and she thinks it is, and she explained why. I'm not going to go into that whole, but you know,
I do too. I
bring that up to say, you know, I am a Joss Whedon girl, Buffy, Angel, Firefly, and then he did the Justice League movie, which was outstanding. And then Ray, what was the guy's name?
Ray Fisher.
Ray Fisher came out and almost basically destroyed his career. And I hope that doesn't
really
happen.
Put his entire career on the
Because
line. Which
I
I
love
admire him a lot.
Yeah, I love him in movies, though, is the other thing.
Because it's not like Ben Affleck
No.
said, who
No,
could have said that, and
or
kept
Henry
on with his career.
Cavill, or Gal Gadot, or Jason Momoa. It was
I think Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot eventually came to support it,
but
it was a while.
Ray Fisher was
Ray
the first
Fisher
one.
was on his own against the Hollywood
and
suit
so
for
he
a
comes
while.
out, and then so did
a lot of people from like the
Buffy and Angel. Charisma Carpenter came out, and Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar gave a very vague but very politically correct. So, and I mean, I appreciate watching it, you know, but they all came out, and I remember sitting there going, no, Joss Whedon was my dude. I grew up on Joss Whedon shows. I have all of damn it. Yeah. And now we have Neil Gaiman. And it's like, I don't want to know, part of me. I don't want to know about all your stupid skeletons in your closet, because you're going to ruin the books and movies and TV shows that I absolutely grew up on and loved, like Kevin Spacey. There's so many movies I can't watch by him now because, and then like The Flash, super excited about that. And then Ezra Miller went off the deep end and did all that crazy shit. And it's like, the rage of wanting to be on the right side of history, and also, but I also want to read and watch these movies because they're all of the stuff that I really love.
Yeah.
Stop it. Keep it in your pants. Stop assaulting people. Stop doing shitty things and then get acting surprised when it comes out.
I had a conversation with one of my close friends after the Neil Gaiman news broke, and we both had this very weird reaction where we were like, "Did you hear it?" And then we were like, "Yeah, not surprised though." And it was like weird that like we both felt like maybe something was a bit off over the years. Like you don't want it to be there.
Yeah.
I recently tried to read earlier this year the Neil Gaiman Reader, which was like a collection of short stories throughout his entire career.
Sure.
And I was reading some of his earliest short stories, and there were certain things in certain stories where I'm like, I don't like this. I'm feeling a very visceral kind of
reaction,
agitated reaction to like, it's almost like an unsafe feeling. Like,
yeah.
You haven't written this well. And I think maybe he kind of learned how to leave that stuff on the cutting room floor as he grew as a writer.
That's funny that you say that, because I was reading a book that I just started maybe a couple days ago, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I was reading the book and it got into something that I had a very visceral reaction to. Like,
which I like a visceral reaction, but
it
in the
made
right
me
direction.
angry because I was like, this is very judgy, what you're writing, and it's on the wrong side of the argument. And it pissed me off, and I was like, I'm not going to finish this book.
Yeah. A lot of times when someone comes out, it's like J.K. Rowling, for instance, going backwards then, suddenly after exposing who she was as a person, I was able to see a lot more faults with the Harry Potter series that I'd been willing to overlook beforehand. Like,
yeah, and I read stuff and I don't know if my brain just like doesn't acknowledge the bad stuff that I'm reading because I'm enjoying the good stuff so much, because I just don't think about it when I'm reading it. But then, you know, people like you and other readers that I'm friends with will bring stuff up, and it's like, oh yeah.
Or like Joss Whedon, for instance, you go back and watch the Avengers films. Like, I do not like the way he wrote Black Widow in either of those movies.
Really?
I not at all. I think it is tremendously disrespectful to her character. And there's so much toxic masculinity in those films. Like, the guys are so like, if you look at we're both Marvel fans, so Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I felt was a really, really good movie and made me enjoy Captain America as a character.
Sure.
And then when Joss Whedon came back for the Avengers, suddenly he was like angrily chopping wood and ripping it apart and like very just pissy and kind of, I'm the tough guy. And I'm like, this isn't kind of.
I can see that. For me, it felt like a natural reaction to what was going on. But I can see your perspective on that.
But if you think of, like, I like that character as, like, you know, he's the shrimpy little kid with polio who grows up to be this superhero. And even though he becomes muscular Chris Evans, he's always going to be that little kid from Brooklyn getting beat up in alleys and like doing the right thing. So when you have him have this very super masculine, aggressive personality, like when he's talking to Iron Man or something, I don't buy that for him.
I can see that. But yeah, I had a visceral reaction to reading this book, and it was just something that had happened to the character in this book, and the reaction of what she was going through, and I was like, this is bullshit.
Oh yeah, if we're talking about superheroes, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, who was Miss Marvel during like the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
There was a plot line from that time period where she was forcibly impregnated and had a baby like come to term in several months. And all the other Avengers guilt trip her for not caring more about her newborn son, who's
that she didn't even. Oh my God!
And then I think Chris Claremont in an X-Men comic much later had Miss Marvel come back from space and basically address the Avengers and be like, "You all let me down," and like, so
good.
It's interesting to like see. Like, I really enjoy women in comics right now, because women are writing comics about women now.
I love that
and
so
there's
much.
a lot of plot lines like addressing them facing their trauma, which is what the men wrote for them in like the 60s, 70s,
you
and
know,
80s.
Now, I will say this caveat as well, that I'm not man hating.
Mhm.
I think that there were,
I am.
I think that there were a lot of missed opportunities, and there was a lot of missed understandings about why things happen with women that they do, or how women react. And so you've got, my husband is included in this. You have a whole section of men now who are seeing things through a woman's perspective and going, yeah, that is bullshit.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate the men, and TikTok has a lot of them. Lots of social media. There are a bunch of men who are looking at the women's
Like
perspective.
the red flags guy.
Yeah, the red flags guy is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Can't remember what his name
No,
is.
no,
off
no.
the top
But
of my head.
people like that who are looking at women and going, yeah, that is bullshit. Why are you having to put up with
Yeah,
that?
and that's
Men should stop doing that.
That's the importance of voices in fiction.
Yes, and I
Because,
love
like,
that.
What is it like? My grandfather, for instance, grew up in the 60s in the
Yeah,
South,
yeah, yeah.
among that. And then like several years ago, we went to see the Black Panther movie in theaters together. And
So
he
good.
gets to grow as a person by seeing these characters in fiction rather than like the environment around him.
Yes.
And like that's why it's important to invite so many different people into your life too. Because so much bigotry comes from people who've isolated themselves within their communities. And
well, and I will say that's one thing that I've tried really hard to do, especially in the last maybe 20 years, is that I have more gay friends, more trans friends, more bisexual friends, more Black friends. I have several Asian friends, and I'm not, it makes me sound like I'm collecting, but I'm not. What I'm trying to do is open myself up to a potential
to
of
a broader
relationship, a broader community that allows me to ask questions when I have read something or seen something and I want further understanding, or I want to explore
and I like that
my feelings about that.
You'll sometimes get answers to questions you'd never even thought of
Exactly.
asking.
And you and I have had conversations where you said stuff to me that I'm not going to go into, but you guys have said, you have said stuff to me that has made me go, huh. And I've had to sit later, after I've gone home and really think about that, and just, I didn't think about it that way.
And because growing up in the South as a queer girl, not great, but one of the things I do appreciate is because the South rallied so hard for segregation more than any part of the country. More anti-segregation laws were forced on this part of the country than anywhere else. Which means that when I got to grow up and go to school, I went to school in a very varied populace and got to experience that as this is my normal community. These are people. And it's not like racism wasn't still happening in the halls. Like it was, but you weren't just on a single side of history. I didn't have to go to an all white or predominantly white school.
Well, and that's one of the things too, is part of my love of my relationships with everybody is that I've asked some of my African American friends, give me some book titles that you think I should carry in the store. And my queer friends, and give me some book titles that you think I should carry in the store, because I don't know what that genre is, but I would like to learn. So I open myself up by saying, give me book titles that you think that I should carry in the store. And then I try to go find those, and invariably someone will come in, oh my God, I love that you have this book. And I'm just like,
it's always been a journey for me to find like the queer books that I'm looking for. And like, because a lot of times I've mainly bought from used bookstores and stuff. And a lot of times I won't be able to find very obscure lesbian titles at like the bookstores around here. So those are often ones I really have to go.
I tell people all the time, if you have a book, I don't care what it is, I will order it for you.
I was thinking once I get my to read pile down a little bit shorter, I was thinking of coming in with a list of books, being like, hey, can you find these?
We actually have somebody that does that. They are a trans person, and they have been trying to figure out how they feel in their new reality, trying to say it in the right way. And so they have had me order them books to help them explore and understand and grow. And, they will come back and talk to me about the book after they've read it. And I've even read some of the books, and it's like that was really good. You're absolutely right on that point. And I will go and rebuy the book and put it back on my shelf.
You know what's funny is, in terms of like queer fiction, a lot of the stuff I read will be like, there's a lot of good queer characters in comics, like Insexts, spelled Insexts,
Okay.
is about like two Victorian lesbians who get weird bug powers and fight the patriarchy. There's one I like called Crowded, which is about a bounty hunter and the girl she's protecting.
I love that so much.
I feel like my mom reads so much more queer nonfiction than I do, as just being her straight ally self.
That's so funny. And I love that.
So I feel like my mom has read a lot of like, these are the queer books you need to read. And I've been like, yeah, I'd rather read a superhero thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right.
It's like, I live it. I don't need to read it.
Seriously. Well, Zoe, we're about out of time. I want to say thank you so much for hanging out and sit down with me. Dude, I love you. I say it all the time. Like, Zoe, thing about Zoe is I'll be sitting around and Zoe will say or do something, and all I know to do is just sit there and laugh and just, I love you. Because it's always just some weird, unexpected thing that it's just.
You gave me one of the best compliments I ever received recently, where you're like, you remind me of Lydia Dietz from Beetlejuice. And I was
you
like,
really do.
That comes second only to the time I was at a Pride event and a woman dressed as a witch told me I looked like a young Lisa Loeb, and I'll be chasing that high for the rest of my life.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We definitely appreciate it.
Oh, you can follow me on Instagram if you want.
Yes.
At Zoe Persephone Bacurin, ZoePersephoneBacurin. It's not a lot of letters. Don't worry about it.
No, but yeah. So if you follow the Spine Book Shop on Instagram, we follow her, so you can follow us there as well. And definitely don't forget to like, share, and follow the Spine Book Shop and the Spine Bookcast. Happy reading, everybody.
We love you.